What do you think about my blue shirt?
I had a thought about that.
And what was that thought?
Vanity?
We just felt that we should do a little difference from the old khaki. Now let's talk about Norman Ader. Norman Ader was and is a complete man of the theater. He studied with Alvin Nicolai. He ran a theater company for children called Pumpernickel Players for 10 years. Over there on the right-hand side is one of his blacklight props. Keep an eye on the bird over here because it's going to show up again in the next painting of Norman that we look at, a painting of St. Francis. Norman wanted to be painted. He was a friend of Michael Ballard, who Kitty did a book with, Conversations with a Dancer. Michael was Murray Lewis's dance captain. Kitty did a lot of traveling with the company. Norman, at one point, we were having a cup of coffee in Greenwich Village when I first met him, and he said, "How would you like to do a painting of me?" And I said, "Fine." And that has begun a lifelong friendship. Norman was so inventive in his theater performances. He choreographed Peter and the Wolf. The Pumpernickel Players did a lot of work in schools in New York. Norman choreographed a St. Francis, the likes of which, well, I think it's probably the most spiritual thing I've ever seen in the theater. I saw it uptown at the Riverside Church, where in a small chapel to the left as you go in was perfect space, as Norman said. So we did St. Francis and St. Clair in this theater production. To give you an idea of how Norman approached the theater, he took for this performance, these performances, he took from the Little Flowers of St. Francis those incredible short stories of the life of St. Francis which come to us directly from the 13th century with no interpretation. They're just as fresh as the day they were composed. Norman took one of St. Clair, an episode in which St. Clair had loaves of bread. A bishop came and the bishop asked St. Clair to bless the bread. She refused. She said, "You are a priest, I'm not, you should do it," and he ordered her to do it. She did, and crosses appeared on the loaves of bread. Norman told me a little while ago that he baked fresh loaves of bread himself before every performance. Norman was one of those rare people who was a caregiver in every department, whether it was on stage or as a personal friend, or right now when he is at home in Florida taking care literally 24 hours a day of his mother. While we were working on the first painting of Norman Ader, Norman said, "I'd like to be painted as St. Francis." Well, I approached that with a question mark because I was in my atheistical phase at that point, and I had not too long ago written my Quaker godmother that I thought all the saints should have their credentials checked. She never responded, and years later I said, "Why didn't you?" And she said the remark was so foolish that it didn't bear a response. So I began to read Katsantzakis and the Fioretti, the Little Flowers, and I became absorbed and interested in saints of all different sizes and types and whatever, and became convinced that there is such a thing as a saint. And this is the first of the paintings that I did of Norman as St. Francis. I did two more, And I think you can see the dancer in this. At one point I had a moon about that big in the lower left and a very symbolic kind of sun up here. They didn't work. It didn't work for me. And some years later I scraped them out and just let the body do its own speaking. There is the bird that we saw in the other painting.